Kia ora everyone, welcome to Board Talks. I'm Rose, I'm the CEO of Community Governance Aotearoa. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like, please put your name in the chat or your organisation where you are Zooming in from. So we would love to know who you are, where you're from. Our board talks, we've been running this for about 4 years. They run every 2 months. We've had over 5,000 or so people register since launching our board talks. And they are a platform for you. So it's just around getting good quality speakers and content and all things governance. So thanks again. If you're a returning Board Talk friend, do a shout out. Love to hear from you. But also if you're new, our format is, it's very conversational, community led. Got any questions, put them in the chat. We don't get it to them. We'll try to get back to you with some answers, and also lots of resources and links are shared throughout the talk as well. Board Talks is recorded and then we put it up on our website post-talk, so you can access it and you can also listen in on Spotify. Okay, I'm just going to have a quick look at who's all the lovely people joining us. We've got Beth from Taupo, Deborah, kia ora. Some really neat people joining. Lots of community groups right throughout Aotearoa, which is our community. Got over 5,000 people joining Community Governance Aotearoa, so it's fantastic. You would have seen if you joined up on our Pānui, it's just gone out this morning. So again, if you've missed anything, you want to find out what's happening, check that out. Oh, kia ora. Righty, so board talks. We've got two fantastic guests. We've got a returner, so a serial board talk person and someone that led our board talk last August, which was around incorporated societies. So over 4 years of doing board talks, I've never missed one talk, and that was the one I missed, which Steven stepped up and did an amazing job. If you've missed that talk, it is all around incorporated societies. I do have a link, I'll pop it in shortly, but it's on our website again if you want to revisit that one. So we have two fantastic guests today, two community leaders known to our sector. We have Steven Moe and Francesca. So I'm just going to get them to introduce themselves, and then we're going to kick off with constitutions, and we're going to start from a little bit of the basics and the terminology, and we're going to move into a bit of policy. So again, feel free to ask some questions, ask these panelists their experience if they know their stuff. So if you've got anything, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, so kia ora kōrua. Steven, do you want to share where you are zooming in from?
Thank you so much. Tēnā koutou katoa no America ho no te tematanga no ototahi toku kainga ina ene. E roia toko tunga mahi o Parry Field Lawyers, ko Steven Moe toku amihi kia koutou katoa. I've been looking forward. I'm really glad that the day is finally here because this is a really important topic. My name is Steven Moe and I work as a lawyer. So I help people get their legal structures right. Just to give you an example, in the last year, I've helped set up about 40 or 50 charities. So constantly supporting people on their journeys and then helping people if they've got questions about revising things. I'm based in Otautahi, Christchurch, but our law firm has about 100 people, and we actually just opened an Auckland office. But today I'm speaking to you from, who can guess where I am? It's the Otago Museum. So I just gave a talk to a bunch of governance people here, about 100 of them, and then I slipped over to do this webinar. So I'm in a little room that they said I could use down in Dunedin. So I'm really grateful to be here, looking forward to the conversations and want to see lots of questions in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Francesca.
Kia ora, thanks, Rose. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Tararua te manga, ko te awa kairangi te awa. No whanui a mata hau, kia whaka ori ori a noho ana hau, ko Francesca toko ingoa no reira tēnā tātou katoa. So kia ora everybody, I'm Francesca. I'm calling in from the sunny Wairarapa today. I have a lot of experience with constitutions. I've probably read about 3,000 of them. So I worked for Charity Services and the Charities Commission. And my background has been in not-for-profits for most of my life. I started volunteering at 12, and so I've never really got away from the sector, which I love. So like Stephen, I think this is a fascinating topic, and I welcome your questions. I think it's going to be a really interesting talk. So thank you, Rose.
Right, so we're going to get into it because that's how we kind of roll at Board Talks. If you want to check out our guests, we have their LinkedIn profiles up too, and a bit of background if you want to explore who they are. But so I'm just going to pose the question: why do we need a constitution?
Should I start with that one, Francesca, maybe, and then you can jump in?
Yeah.
I think for the key with the Constitution is that it contains the beating heart of the organization, and that is your purpose. Every registered charity must have a purpose. I'm sure all of you know this, but there's 4 heads of charity. So you have to be advancing charitable purposes. And where do you write them? In your founding document. So to me, it's a really important document because it's publicly available. Anybody can look up your organization, can download your constitution, and hopefully right at the front, it says what we are here for. So to me, that's important because it's about accountability to the external, that anyone, a funder, for example, a council, a future employee, they might go and look up, what is this organization about? What do their rules say? And then, so that's the external face, is that our rules are clear, here's our purposes, but also this is important internally because an organization needs to internally understand what are our purposes. So the board should be aligned on the purposes which are contained in the founding document. And actually, here's a little interesting exercise. Why don't you try this at your next board meeting? Go around the room and say, what are we here for? What is our purpose? It's quite interesting if you get 5 people and they all say different things. Maybe you need to have a little bit of a conversation and revisit, what does the document say? What is our purpose? So that's just an initial high-level thought. It's important because it has your purpose. Over to you, Francesca.
I agree. The purpose is really important, but also, apart from the purpose, it sets out a whole lot of parameters about how you're going to operate. So if you think about getting together with a group of people that you may not know very well, and you all might have a different idea, the Constitution will set it out very clearly about how you're going to manage your finances, what the powers of the board are going to be. What are you going to do if you wind up? You know, if your organization is established for a small time, or you might not get funding to carry on, what are you going to do when your organization ends? So your constitution is like this beautiful start to finish of how you will run your organization. And lots of people haven't read their constitutions, and like Stephen, they will all have, like Stephen said, they'll all have different views about what their purpose is. So it's really important that you know what your organisation is set up for.
Yeah, thank you both. And I'm a big fan of constitutions. I prefer them over policies. I'm not so much the policy person who wants to update them all the time, but I do love a constitution. And we'll probably get into a little bit, because when you need the constitution, that's usually when something might have got a little bit awry. So, but just going back to around constitution, because I often get asked this quite a bit, is around what's the difference between a constitution and trust deed, the terminology, like, do you want to explore a little bit just to clarify what they are?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So when we're using the word constitution, sometimes it's like a generic word that covers a lot of different types of document. But essentially what we're meaning is the founding document for the organization. So what you'll find is that different legal entity types tend to talk about their founding document using different words. So for example, there are currently about 29,000 registered charities in New Zealand, and some of them are charitable trusts. So a charitable trust, it would have a trust deed. So not a constitution, a trust deed, but it does the same thing. A company would have a constitution. And then an incorporated society, sometimes they're called rules, or a constitution. So depending on the entity type, you might end up with slightly different terminology. But what it's getting at is this is the founding document for the organization. But Francesca, you've read 3,000 of them, so anything else there?
Well, I suppose also there's unincorporated groups, and so they would have either a constitution or rules. A lot of organisations call it just rules generically, so it covers everything. Yeah, I don't think I can add any more than that. I mean, different organisations will have different types, but they all contain how you'll operate.
Yeah, and I think it is, again, it's just that founding documentation, isn't it? It is the heart. So I think a little bit of either feel free to put it in the chat or use the little reaction button if you can, but how many people have read their constitution or recently? Any recent readers? Don't know where it is, can't find it, haven't seen it.
Getting
don't
some
know.
thumbs up there, so some people
Yeah.
have. That's
Oh,
good.
yeah. It's great. But, often sometimes you don't. So it's not really the induction document that's handed over, is it? It's kind of like get into the meeting and off you go. But then you're like, what rules?
Can we
Okay,
pause
so
on that just for a second?
yes.
Because I love what you just said, the induction. How many of our organizations do an induction for people, and what do you give them before they join a board? I've talked with many groups, and it goes like this. And today we'd just like to say, welcome, Anna. It's your first meeting. It's great to have you here. Okay, agenda item number 1. And there's no documents provided. There's no induction pack. There's no, here's the latest accounts. Let me share with you about how we operate. Here's our funding sources. So I think we could do better as organizations in providing an induction pack. And the induction pack, probably key policies, but I would include this document we're talking about, because as we said, it sets out the purpose. So maybe a challenge for some of us. Have you got an induction pack for new board members when they join?
So I think that, a lot of that terminology is the trustee, the rules, the constitution. But when we first met Steven, it was really over actually Community Governance Aotearoa's constitution. So something we've worked on. And at that time, we had a co-governing model and 2 different groups and the whole kind of a new approach to how our constitution was written. But what are some examples of really good constitutions that you've seen? And some key things too, because we would all probably know when we need it, as in AGMs, appointing board members, things like that. But what would you say that the real basics of what you should be having in there? And also, the next step would be, what do you think we need to be updating in those to reflect current times? Yeah.
Do you want to answer that one, Francesca? I've got a thought which I can share while you think of what it should contain. I'm just looking at the chat, and I love the chat because there's so many great comments and questions. So please keep it coming. It's giving me energy, because if we were in a room, we could have people raising their hands, but we need to use IT the best way. And there's a point in here which is really great. It says, is there a legal requirement to review these key documents every few years? And the answer is yes, because the Charities Act has actually changed relatively recently. So there now is a requirement that every 3 years you're certifying that your documents are fit for purpose. And by the way, that's not just the trust deed or the constitution. I think that's the governance documents. So it could be policies as well. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure Francesca knows a bit about this coming from the charities, and
I think
it is every 3 years. So do you want to chip in there, Francesca, with what you've been saying?
Yeah, we could talk about that now. We could talk about that later. Why don't we carry on with this question, Rose, and then we could get to that, because it is an important bit. But I think what you're asking about, what are some good examples of well-written constitutions? Because I've seen so many, they need to be well thought out. So I've seen a lot of ideas and constitutions that probably shouldn't be there. And for people to be really clear about what their purpose is. Quite often there's the catch-all phrase at the end of a lot of purpose clauses, and it says we can do anything, you know, that's charitable, which makes an organisation's scope very, very broad. And perhaps sometimes that's needed, and perhaps sometimes organisations need to be really just clear, 3 points or 4 points about what they're set up to do. I think constitutions need to be easy to read, and I've seen, and we've all seen really old constitutions full of really horrible legal language that nobody understands, and you get a headache looking at it. We want people to know and understand their constitutions. So let's start with some really plain English. Quite often they're really, really long and they don't need to be, so they could be shorter and much more to the point. And I suppose fit for purpose is the other thing, you know. So for modern times, constitutions sometimes don't get updated for 20 or 30 or 50 or longer years. And so it's important that you look at your constitution and think, what are the things that I need to modernise my constitution for? So digital voting, digital signatures, you know, like to just make sure your constitution is moving with the times.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, often the queries that we will receive at community governance has been around the appointment of the chair, removal of board members, removal if something goes wrong. So that kind of thing. So you do need some parameters around it. Or the terms, how long are those appointments for? How are they reappointed? Like those are kind of common practice ones. But it's often when things go wrong is when the constitution gets hauled out. So that's the time that you really should be reviewing your constitution earlier, because when things get a little bit tricky, then you're going back to say, oh, how do we navigate through this? But good points around digital and tech, so online voting, the allowance for that, or if not. Yeah, and there was a question in there around AI as well. So what about you, Stephen, about what you
I was
said?
just going to follow on. I think everything Francesca said is amazing, which I knew would be the case. But I had one other thing to add, which is, when was your founding document written? So is it written with a typewriter? And I guarantee you, for a lot of you, when you go look at your document, you're going to go, this was written with a typewriter in 1982 or in 1971, or the oldest ones I've seen, 1930s, 1920s, like literally 100 years ago. So I guarantee you, if your document was written on a typewriter, or let's be honest, even before 2019, it probably needs an upgrade and probably needs an update. For example, oftentimes the terminology is talking about the chairman. You know, like it's a basic thing, it's a little thing, but we don't talk about the chairman. You know, we talk about the chair or the board. You know, so it's a simple thing, but it's something that you can get right really easily. So the reason I mentioned 2019 is that the Trusts Act 2019 reformed this area of law, and it actually changed the position for trustees. So if your document, this is for trusts, if your document is from before that time, even 2015-16, it might not be protecting your trustees as fully as it could. So you might want to go into your document, talk with a lawyer, and maybe revisit the document, assuming you have a bit of funding, which we can get onto, how much does it cost and things like that. But my point is, these documents should be ever growing, changing to reflect how society has changed, how the organization has changed, update them, maybe tweak the purposes. I'm not saying go from we're doing a preschool to we're saving the penguins, but maybe there is some tweaking that needs to happen around the wording and the remit. So don't view them as etched in stone, never to be altered. If anything, I view them as documents that are organic, living, and breathing as we go.
Yeah, I think that's where the policies probably might lean on a little bit more to review, but we don't always do that with the constitutions, do we? Unless there's been some law changes. We did host a board talk around the Charities Changes Act, and that was some time ago, maybe a year ago at least, and it was one of our highest talks. Like, we had a huge amount of participation in that. We've got a lot of documents, and the talk is available, so we can also pop that in. It's all on our website as well. But that is around what you're talking about earlier, Stephen, is the commitment, if you are a registered charity, to make sure that you update your governance rules. And there's also, if you've got managers or your GM or CEO is equally involved in the strategy of the organisation and really embedded alongside the board, then there's parameters around you must recognise them as within the constitution and recognise them as on the charities. So you need to have a look at that as well. So it's around dual responsibilities and that. What I would say though is that community governance, we've got our good governance code, which is a free code for our community that you can use. It's got board evaluations as well. And we encourage you to use that to say that you've undertaken board evaluations, board governance. It's a free resource as well. So not all governance has to be paid. There are some tools and resources that are free as well. There we go. All right, any comments on there, Francesca?
No.
Oh. Okay, I'll just check the chat. If we've got any other questions coming in there.
There's actually a good one. If it's okay, Molly's just said here, what if you have two founding trustees who would be members of the board since it's in its infancy? What's the best practice around founder members and letting go at some point? So maybe just a brief comment on that. This in a way highlights the point I was making before, that sometimes you might need to adapt or update your founding documents as the organization grows. So one of my great fears for charities is that they become too dependent on one person, you know, the founder. That's a key person risk. An organization or a charity should be about a movement which is beyond any one person. So just be cautious. If one person has the say on everything, it's probably not going to last longer than that person being involved. So I'd like to see a transition to a group of people carrying forward the kaupapa, and that might be something that needs to be reflected in the trust deed. The best way that I've seen is having term limits. So instead of appointing people, you're here for life. 35 years later, they retire. I think it's best practice to have some limits, like 3 years. You're appointed for 3 years, then let's have a discussion, maybe appoint again for 3 years, or maybe it's time to step off and let somebody else come in. So just best practice around that is a good topic as well. Francesca, what have you seen on that topic?
Funny, when I was thinking about this last night, Stephen, I did think about someone coming to chat to me about a founder who had been there for 30 years and they didn't know how to get this person, you know, to step aside. The organization was suffering. Really, no new ideas. Yeah, and they didn't know that they could vary their trust deed. And like you said before, things aren't set in stone. Constitutions, trust deeds, they can be amended and varied easily. So yeah, please keep updating, keep thinking about how it will work best for you. Does it look like on the outside for your funders, you know, for stakeholders that are interested in what you do? It doesn't look so good if you've got the same person at the helm for 30 years making the same decisions.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Equally, though, I've also seen on iwi Māori entities that that's a commonplace. So it's probably
Yes.
my perception of that is how you treat that mata role to co-mata role to something. Thinking about founders, I always try and steer clear of if someone asks me to go on a board if there's a founder, because it's very hard to let go of the reins, isn't it? So very difficult. But yeah, I like the idea that you're both saying around a term, having a term.
And I think that's in the chat. It said, in the chat, somebody's talked about succession planning, which I think is a really highlighting the point you're making. How do we, because actually one of the roles of a board is to think about who will be here in 10 years' time. And I think too often we're quite short-sighted and we're not planning ahead. So for example, could we bring on a youth leader who comes and sits with us, is learning the kaupapa so that at the right moment they can join the board? Or when somebody finishes on the board, instead of saying, well, farewell, thanks for everything, see you one day. What if you had an advisory board that they could join? So they move out of the trust role or the board member role into, maybe call it the kaitiaki group, or, you know, we're looking after, I like to think of those groups as the conscience of the charity. So those people, maybe there's 4 or 5 people who used to be on the governance, and now they're over here as advisors, not legally, you know, responsible, but if there's a big change, you might go and talk to them. So there's ways to continue to get the wisdom from people who have been involved as well.
Yeah, I think that's what, like Francesca was saying too, is around having honest conversation around when is a good time to exit, because you need to think about that succession planning, what you're saying, Stephen, over say 10 years. It means that 3 years, 6 years, we know you're bringing on, you kind of want experienced. You don't want to lose all that intel that you've built up too. So, and then some of the more experienced trustees or board members can help mentor and guide some of the newbies coming on. So having a good timeline, thinking about it, it's actually something that's come up in our surveys quite a lot. We survey our community, and succession planning is a real hot topic. So I always think it's probably, you want to spend a bit of time on it. It's not the key driver all the time, but just, yeah, trying to partner up new ones to those experienced. So there's a real good plan about direction of travel. So.
Can I give a compliment to everybody online? Because this is a really engaged chat. It's so cool to see all of these comments and questions, and well done, everybody. I've been on lots of webinars and often nobody's typing, but this is great. In the chat, I'm just putting a board skills matrix, which we did to help people think about what's the skill set on the board, because you don't want everybody to be thinking the same thing. You need a diversity of thought. So that might be something that's a free resource that can help as well. And I know you've got a lot of good resources on this as well, Rose.
Yeah, we've got probably just one I mentioned before. Just grab it and chuck it in the chat as well as our board evaluation. So that's a good one. Just to, it's based on our code as well, which is a free resource. I'll pop it in the chat. But that means you get a good, when we're talking about the governance responsibilities for the new Charities Act, you can use that template to do at the start of the year and at the end and see how you're kind of progressing. So it's a really good free resource.
Another one, another document in the chat, people are putting, what about other documents? So another one can be a board charter, and a board charter can set out a little bit of the culture of the board. So it's not in the trust deed or the constitution, but it might say, like, what's the role of the chair? What's the role of the trustee or the person on the governance? What if we have a conflict? Who's the decision making? How often do we meet? So you can put some of that stuff in a board charter, which could have a job description, like somebody said, that can help as well with transparency.
Yeah, it's nice. So it's comment by Roger around experience of bringing in board interns, and it's worked really well. Next generation board member. So yeah, that's cool. But also, again, it's around making sure that you've got someone experienced that can help mentor the younger person coming in or someone new. So there, as we kind of touched on, it's an induction process. And your constitution should be number one in the induction. It's probably a little bit crazy that we don't always do that. We'll go for the policies, and we go for, we've got this big project coming up, or we've got some really cool event on, but we don't go to the actual founding, like Stephen kind of mentioned at the start, the heart of who we are and our purpose. So it's a good one to put in there if you haven't already. Okay, so what would you say around, I've shared this before with Stephen, because he is a lawyer and his business is lawyering, but do we need a lawyer for a constitution? Do we have to always go to find a lawyer when stuff goes wrong, or it's like get a lawyer, or when we have to do our constitution? What's your thoughts on that?
Do you want to go first, Francesca?
Yeah, I'll start. It will depend. You know, charities are organizations are all different shapes and sizes, and one size isn't going to fit all. So, if you are a really small organization and you're not going to employ anybody, and you're not going to lease a building, and you're not going to have a lot of money, and you're just going to do something little as your charitable purpose, then you may not need a constitution. you know, I suppose it depends on how much risk is involved. If you are larger and you are setting up something bigger and you're going to employ a whole lot of people, or you're working with vulnerable people and you need to adhere to the law around that. Yeah, if you've got more money and more assets, then there's more risk, and you probably do need to think about consulting a lawyer. So I think that it's a case-by-case basis. Some charities start small and organisations start small and grow, and there might be a time where they might have written something and then they get bigger. But for lots of little organisations, they can find a constitution online, and I can put some links in, and they can use the handy resources that we have in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and they can write their own. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you. So this is totally self-interested, right? Because I am a lawyer. And of course, I'm going to land on if you can afford it and if you can get input, then it's usually going to help you, because a lawyer is going to maybe bring some knowledge based on, like, we've set up 50 charities in the last year. So I've seen all different variations, all different types of ways of approaching it. And I guess I would ask a question, which is, if you have a toothache, do you go to a dentist? You know, like, if you have a problem with your ankle, do you go see a doctor? Like, we take it for granted that in those situations we would go to see a professional. But for some reason, for legal things, people sometimes Google and just download something that they got off the internet. So the worst case scenario that I've seen is somebody came to me, they'd adopted a constitution, and the constitution they had downloaded for free. Great, no cost, but it was an Australian constitution, and all of the provisions were for Australia, and it didn't provide for things like how do you amend the constitution. It was a totally inadequate document, and it required them to go and get the approval of the New South Wales blah blah blah. So they had just completely missed the mark on what would be an appropriate document. Of course, everyone here, you know, you're all hopefully not going to ever do that, but I have seen it happen a lot. So from my perspective, if you can talk with a lawyer, it's probably going to help you to filter and get a good document. No one believes me when I make this offer, but it's true. I have a 15-minute commute every day. I'm happy to talk at no cost with people if you want to brainstorm or ask ideas. So yeah, I live in Christchurch. I live in Rolleston. I work in Christchurch. Would I rather listen to the radio or talk to someone doing something amazing? So there are resources out there, and I think our host today has an amazing website with a whole bunch of free resources that will give you a lot of good guidance as well. And our site has a lot of free resources as well. My philosophy is you give, and then people will come and ask for your help as well. So,
well, I think we just need to pause there a little bit, Stephen. So what time is your commute, and what's your phone number?
It's the morning.
Everyone, write it down, pro bono.
Yeah, no, it's a legit offer. I'll put my phone number in the chat, because it is. I talk to people probably, I don't know how many, probably 5 or 6 a week would take me up on it.
I think that's very similar. Whilst I'm not a lawyer, that's part of governance. Is I respond to heaps of constitutional queries. So from school boards to incorporated societies, they're pretty my favourite. I do love the membership organisations, having chaired a couple, and they're always kind of tricky, and probably getting into the incorporated societies part a little bit, because if you've got any questions, this is definitely the panel to be asking if you haven't already moved down that road or track. We've done quite a bit of resources on that. Have you seen anything in this space, Francesca and Stephen, around the changes or the direction that incorporated societies are changing to, like their structure or governing body, or how they're kind of doing things differently? Have you got something you can share with us?
Stephen could start on that one.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Just to finish off, because I see in the chat somebody said about pro bono. Definitely, if there's a local lawyer who you can approach and say, would you give us some pro bono support, then that's always a good option. My only qualification there is not every lawyer knows everything about charities law, because it's actually quite a specialist area. So if you got an eye infection, do you go to the foot specialist? You know, like so just be aware that, yeah, I wish as a lawyer that I knew everything about every law, but I admit that my specialty is this area. So it's the same. If you go to a local lawyer, they may offer to help, but they may not actually have the knowledge to be able to support you in a way that will actually be of benefit. So that might be worth remembering as well.
Probably a little bit of back to us too, though. That's pretty much what we do too. So if you've got any questions, you can pop it into info@communitygovernance.org.nz, but we respond in confidence and always happy to take a phone call. We'll find you the right person. That's why we do lean on to Steven. I'll throw him some things over time that come in. So here to help.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember our conversations a couple of years ago, like that was drafting the document for this organization. It was a good process to go through. You were great, actually, because you always came back with proactive, let's move this way, let's go there. So it was really easy. Now, incorporated societies, there's 24,000 of them. They all have to re-register. So some of you might be incorporated societies. Don't forget, 5th of April, it's coming up. More than half have not yet re-registered. I put a letter to the relevant ministers. I suggested they extend the time period, and the answer back was, well, we've given a lot of time, we've done awareness, we're not changing it. So on the 6th of April, there's going to be probably thousands of entities that cease to exist. But the ones that I'm seeing, it's a fundamental question. Should we remain as an incorporated society, or should we use this as a chance to become something else? Incorporated societies actually have some issues from time to time. They can become political. They can have takeovers in them. And so some groups are switching from a charitable incorporated society to a charitable trust. So we've got an information hub. I'll put it in the chat now, and that might be of help. But I am seeing groups move from this entity type to this entity type. Or like Francesca said, maybe you're an incorporated society now. Maybe you should unincorporate and just be a group of people who meet together on a Tuesday and have $1,000 a year. Like, do you need to be a registered charity? Do you need to be incorporated? So it's a good point to ask those questions too. Over to you, Francesca.
I suppose we need to explain then what the risk is for people that do unincorporate. So when you unincorporate, you don't have that legal entity protection for the trustees. So that's another thing to put in your mind when you're thinking about it. The Incorporated Societies Act changes have come around really quickly. They put in a 3-year process, and it's quite incredible to think that that is nearly over. I remember doing a webinar a year ago, and the State of the Sector report had just come out, and in it, 34% of the people they surveyed did not know what kind of organisation they had. So if you are not sure whether you are operating an incorporated society or not, my advice is to go and find out, because April will be here before we know it. And if you do have an incorporated society, it's really important that you get, and you want to re-register, it's important that you get started. It's a process. It'll take some time. Steven's got some information. Community Governance has got some information. The Incorporated Societies Companies Office has information. So I'd go and find out. If you're thinking that you need to re-register and you haven't done it, go find out if you are an incorporated society. If your name has trust in it, you're not. I can just about guarantee you are not. And I've had lots of people that say to me, I'm an incorporated society charitable trust. You cannot be. It is important that you know what type of organisation, because if you're a charitable trust right now, you can breathe a sigh of relief. You don't have to worry about it. But if you are an incorporated society, you need to get snappy on it, because the Companies Office has said you will cease to exist after. We know that organisations will still be going on and you'll still be feeding people or doing the kind things that you do, but it will affect a lot of things. So get thinking about it now and get talking about it in your meetings.
So there's a comment in from Claire, I think, around 20-week wait at charities services. Is it charities or is it incorporated?
Yeah, I can speak to that, and you can too as well, I'm sure, Francesca. Just to finish the Incorporated Society stream of thought in the chat, I put the link to our information hub. So like as you've heard, there's good sources of information. We've done webinars, videos, there's a guide, there's literally dozens of articles. I think our frequently asked questions now has about 130 questions and answers that we've gone, because we've spoken to probably 2,000 or so people on the free webinars we hold, generally once a month. So anyway, lots of information there. But I would just encourage people to do exactly what Francesca's saying, is what actually are we? Because I've had many groups come to us and they say, we're worried because we're an incorporated society, we have to re-register. And you look at their rules and they're like, you're actually a charitable trust. Like, but it gets confusing because sometimes charitable trusts have adopted rules that read like incorporated societies or the other way around. And there are situations where trusts have registered under the society's rules. So it is confusing. If you're confused, it might be because you're in one of those, wait, what are we situations? But this is a good point, is should we, like, are our rules clear about what we are? And if they're not, revise them, change them so that they are clear. So I think that's a really important thing. In the chat, I'm putting a link to, on LinkedIn, I posted about the letter I wrote to the ministers, and this has a summary of what they said. So if anyone's into LinkedIn, you can click there and see where we got to.
Yeah, I think it's there's a few, just reading through the chat too, and there's a few questions in here because we've just touched on moving, say if you want to make the decision to move out and not re-register as incorporated society, so what that risk is, and some chat in the some comments in the chat around the risk if you can't apply for funding, and something about a bank account. So what would you say, Francesca, is the pros and cons of moving from and just not re-registering?
Well, like I said before, there is a protection for being in an incorporated society. So you become a legal entity, and your people are protected from anything untoward. So that is one thing. Funders are more likely to fund an incorporated society than a society that is unincorporated, or you're likely to get more money. You can enter contracts and employ people if you're an incorporated society. If you're unincorporated, it's a lot more, it's a less formal structure. So you won't employ people necessarily. Yeah, and you won't be able to lease the building. So some of those important things that you need to do. But if you are, like Steven said, a tiny little group, and you're thinking, hey, why are we here? This is going to be a lot of work. A lot of older incorporated societies with older members are finding, their members aren't coming as much. Their group is winding up anyway, slowly. So it might be time to say, okay, that's enough. Or to unincorporate and just be a group of people that meet up. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and it might be, as we're kind of giving, like the local knitting club, and we meet on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock for an hour. Our accounts is, why go to all the hassle of incorporating and having elections? And incorporated societies, they can become this political as well. So I've seen situations where there can be takeovers, and that's why sometimes people would move to a charitable trust as well to protect the assets involved, because some groups might own property, for example. But to answer in the chat, somebody said about incorporation and charity registration status. Just to be clear, there's two government departments that care about you on this point. One is Companies Office. They're the ones who incorporate. So they're the ones who you can become an incorporated society or an incorporated trust board or an incorporated company. And then Charity Services is different. So if you're one of these entities, you then apply to become what's called a registered charity. And the registration as a charity is what then eventually leads to the tax position of having tax donee status. So it's possible to be an incorporated society, which is not a registered charity because nobody ever applied for it. And that might be appropriate because maybe it's about members rather than advancing charitable purpose. So I realize that's a lot of information, but I hope that maybe watch it back. But there's different groups, different government departments. The other one is the IRD. They're the ones who actually are the tax position. But hopefully it helps explain for that person who put the question in the chat.
Yeah, and we've had two big changes over the last couple of years, and that's been some of the feedback for the sector as we had Charities Act changes, which was amendment, and then we've had incorporated societies. They have given a long lead-in to re-register. There's been a huge amount of kind of promotion out there, Stephen. You've done heaps of work. You've got some great resources which we've shared out, and yeah, I mean, again, a bit of a hands up if you can is to is anyone just hasn't done that yet? If you are incorporated, that's why you're here. You're just thinking, oh, I better get on to that. That'll be interesting to know. Oh yeah, some honest people.
You're not alone, anybody. You're not alone. Like Stephen said, half of the organisations haven't re-registered.
There's a lot of information out there to do it and get started. So we would encourage you again to get started. There's an interesting comment, and this came up before too, was around a group has gone through the process of incorporation and then they're feeling like no one's checking their constitution. It's just being processed. So is there, what have you heard, Stephen? You're kind of nodding
I
away.
think that's exactly what's happening. And my fear is that it's because as the person noted, they clicked a button and like within 5 minutes, they got a "you're now re-registered" email. So it's not possible that it was checked properly. My fear is that, remember the number I said, 24,000? Can you imagine checking 24,000 entities' constitutions? So I think they have made, this is just my own theory, is that they made a policy decision that they would not be going through and checking in detail every constitution. So in some ways, this is a good thing because it means that you can copy paste or use the free constitution builder and upload it. But what I fear is that a year from now, 2 years from now, there's going to be a bunch of groups which have adopted rules which are not fit for purpose and which don't actually work. And that's when it's going to be, because when things go wrong, you look at your rules and you're like, what was this? How did this get approved? So that's my main fear around this issue.
And do you think, Stephen, that that could possibly be something to do with the backlog at charity services? Because they're going to be getting those new constitutions in as well.
I think because you've left, Francesca, now it's gone to custard. So
they needed you to review another 3,000.
They're like,
thank you, thank you. Yeah.
I actually think well, maybe it's related more in a general way to public service cuts, but I think Companies Office is different to charity services. So Companies Office, this is a political discussion, but I think Companies Office maybe has resourcing where they move very quickly. And so typically if you set up a company, you can do that within a day or two. Whereas charity services, as we know, it can take 20 weeks, which is 5 months. I have a client and they applied in October last year and they only got an answer in July. So it was like 9 months later. It was just, and it's so disappointing to me because the charity, they want to get on and do the good work. And they're told, well, we'll let you know in 5 months if you're approved. So it's like, but I've said this before, we need to start a charity to get some donations so we can get some more analysts at charity services so we can speed things up.
Let's meet later.
But it is I view it as a fundamental problem that it's taking this long for things to be reviewed. But, it's part of the public service changes, and I just don't think there's as many people.
Well, I think again, like there's a bit of a comment too, kind of alluding to this. It's a bit of our responsibility to make sure that we're putting up what we are saying is right and how we're going to operate in the fundamentals. So yeah, we've equally got our own responsibilities in this place. Right, we have left our policy part right to the end, which is only not that long, so 10 minutes. So for those of you who are probably saying, I've actually had heaps of policy questions, I wanted to going to move into that a little bit now. We last year we ran Policy Week and we had a fantastic uptake in that, and we've designed a policy hub. So looking for policies, I'll chuck that in here. But I think it's part and parcel of just having a bit of a think about constitutions and policies. Like they are so important to how we govern, and the rules would be like the policy. So just a bit of a, what's your thoughts on policies? How often? That's usually the question. Sometimes I've had lots of organisations who they're reviewing policies over weeks and weeks, and it's a whole big thing, or some don't at all. So what's your kind of thoughts on the general nature of policies?
Do you want to start, Francesca, and then I can?
Yeah, I can start. I was thinking about this last week actually while I was walking the dog, and I thought, lots of people think about policies as a necessary evil, and there's something. It's the word, it's the knowing that you're going to have to get into the nitty-gritty of stuff, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I was thinking, people set up charities, usually organizations, because they want to do something that will benefit other people. And so I think that we should all start thinking about policies as public good, because they help us to keep us on track and to keep us working in the right way to protect our people on our boards, to protect the people that we set ourselves up to work for, to protect our funders and our other stakeholders. Policies are a beautiful framework of keeping everything together. And so maybe we shift our thoughts from the necessary evil to actually this helps us with our public good.
Nicely said. Yeah.
Yeah, I think policies are really important, but I think there might be a temptation to say, well, we need 50 policies or 60 policies. We need everything. But again, it comes back to what's appropriate for our organization. So you don't need to have a policy about something that you don't do. Like it's not relevant at all. So I think I talked with a charity the other day, and they were talking about I think it was like 67 policies. And it was like, oh my goodness, 67. I bet you nobody ever reads them, right? Like, I think what you need is the appropriate policies for your organization. And that might be, for example, if you're working with children, you probably want a child protection policy, right? But if you're not working with children, maybe you don't need that one. So you need to think about your organization and really hone in on the ones that are going to be the most relevant. One that is increasingly coming up, and it's been mentioned in the chat, is artificial intelligence. How do we use artificial intelligence? That's probably a good policy that you might want to consider adopting, because we can tell where that's headed, right? Like it's going to become, even if you don't have a policy, your employees are probably using AI in some way. And here's the key thing from a legal perspective, are they taking personal data and information and uploading it into a ChatGPT type large language model and getting a summary? Where'd that information go? Names, birth dates, addresses, phone numbers. So you need to have a policy about how you use AI. I'm just giving that as one example.
Yeah, actually today in our monthly Pānui, for those who sign up to that, I did write an article about the ethics and AI governance. So if you're interested in that, it's about the building blocks of some of the bit about policies and a bit about articles and documentation that forms why ethics plays such a good, important part in how we treat data. So I've kind of explored that a bit more. Any policy questions? Is there any? There was one around the management and health organisations, and so important, so critical to our community services. So much health and safety and reliance and all that kind of thing. So what's super important, and it would be super important around protecting data and privacy and all those kind of things, which I'm really kind of hot on that topic. But what are your thoughts around the operational, and then with, might have the GM or CEO, but then into board responsibility around overseeing, like checking in, like what's your kind of thoughts on that? What's some tips that you would encourage?
Well, I guess it depends on the size of the organization, but ideally management is coming up with the policies and bringing them to the board to then approve. I don't think that the board members need to be the ones actually drafting the policies or doing all the work. Depends on the organization, because as I'm sure many of the groups on this call are like, I wish we had that distinction and we're also the board members. But strictly speaking, there should be a process for the board to be approving the policies that are needed and necessary. In the chat, I put a link. We've actually just finished a whole suite of policies. So we've got what we call Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And so we're going to be making those available. So there's a link there. And I think it's just for the board to be looking at, well, what do we need? And then interacting with the management about what's appropriate. Francesca, what are your thoughts?
Probably similar to yours, that yeah, and just making sure, not that there's a policy that, but people know which bit of the organisation they're serving if you're on the board, and you know, if you're in operations. And I get that there is a lot of people on the call that they wear all the hats, but if you have an organisation big enough, be very clear about which piece of work that you're doing and which hat you're wearing at the time.
And I think a shout out to you, Rose, and the whole team, because your website is full of plenty of information about policies and what's good and what's bad. And so I would be looking there. I'm going to put in, there's just, I love how many comments there are. It's really an awesome webinar. I'm going to put again the link to our summary, because even if you don't use our policies, it might give you a hint about what are the key ones that you want to have. So every organization, for example, should have a privacy policy. I would have a delegations policy. So what does the board do? What does the CEO do? I would probably have a health and safety policy, depending what you're involved in. I usually would want to, if you're working with young people, rangatahi, I'd want to have a child protection policy, because we've all know about the abuse in care and awful things that have happened in the past. So yeah, those are some of the things. And then we mentioned, like, it's not called a policy, but a board charter might be helpful. Yeah, so anyway, have a look at the link. It will give you a hint of some other key ones that you might want to have.
I think with our policy week, we spent a lot of time getting new policies in place, like writing them. They're all templated so that you can easily pick it up. So that policy week is on our website, on our resource hub, but equally there's a PDF kind of version that you can download. So then you can grab the template of the policy if you don't have it, or you want to think that you might add it to your kind of kete. But what I say is the best policies that I have seen are ones that you can actually understand it. If you read a policy and you can't understand what that policy is all about, then it's not serving your organisation, and no one is going to understand it. It's no point kind of signing off on it or even progressing it. So heaps of times I just see really complicated policies that are very long and not really direct to the point. So we have done a lot of work in this space with policies. We encourage you to put your organisation's name, what you're trying to achieve, and that is the function of a policy. But again, if you don't understand it, there's probably 9 times out of 10 no one else is going to understand it. So rework it so it represents what your intention is.
I heard of a group that had a health and safety policy. It's beautiful. It's 172 pages. No one ever read it, but they refined it. They used pictures, they used illustrations. It was a short, concise, here's how we do health. It was a construction type of business, or, you know, charity business type thing. And then the culture shifted because people actually got into it and read it and looked at it. So yeah, I totally endorse what you're saying. And somebody's asked how often should they be reviewed? I think the rhythm there, somebody said maybe every 2 years, maybe every 3 years, is probably good to be something that you're doing. I wouldn't want a policy to be dated, you know, 1997, and we haven't looked at it since, but we had a policy. That's probably not gonna, like for health and safety, WorkSafe is probably gonna look at it and say, well, sure, you had a policy, but you didn't revise it. So yeah.
And we've got the Charities Act changes that we haven't really talked about, you know, so, and they're asking you to review your governance procedures and anything else. And so that needs to happen every 3 years now.
Yep.
So, you know, when you're reporting to charity services, and it will be from next year, you will need to tick a box on your annual return form to say, we have reviewed our governance and this is the date.
Yeah, we did kind of touch on that of using our Good Governance Code, because the board evaluation is there. It's free. You download it, you share it. We've also got a Te Ao Māori board evaluation. Again, it's free, that you can send out and get input from all of your board members. You can do it twice a year, so you can evaluate yourselves. Then you can use that as a formation to say to charities, we have done a governance review. It's a, I would suggest that for our tier 4s, 3s, but it is a really good way that you're not paying for, say, if you don't have any kind of PD or development in that space. Again, check it out. There's heaps of resources. We're getting heaps of requests. We will put something together, work with the team. Behind the scenes has been Meta from Social Good and Katie Brown. Thank you so much for running the Zoom talk, board talks with us. But we've had a request to put subtitles on for our deaf community. We're also going to do that. So hopefully next week we'll get the talk out. We'll be sharing it. I'm sure Steve and everyone will share it out through their networks. I'm going to put in our next talk, and I want to thank Steven and Francesca so much. Wealth of information, years of expertise on hand. Our last board talk for the year is coming up in December, and we've got 3 fantastic chairs from some very well-known organisations, so Social Investment Board, IHC Chair and Combined Community Trust. So get registered for that one. Thank you so much to everyone that has been with us, who've stayed with us, and fantastic kōrero throughout. So tēnā te mihi nui. Have a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful weekend. Ngā toa. Thank you, everyone.